By the time I was a little girl living in Cabrini Green, I already knew how to run. I knew which stairwells to avoid. I knew which hallways could trap you. And I knew how to make it home before certain boys caught up with me after school. Every day, I ran as fast as I could. The elevators often did not work, so the stairwells became part of our lives. Two different stairways twisted into each other like a maze. I learned how to run up one flight, cross over, double back, and hide quietly between floors while listening to footsteps echo below me. Sometimes I stood only a few stair levels away from the people chasing me while trying not to breathe too loudly. Fear became part of childhood. Some children learned games. Some children learned escape routes. At first, I thought this was just normal life in Chicago public housing. But over time, I started noticing things that frightened me even more. Some classmates stopped showing up at school. Sometimes the neighborhood whispered about people getting killed. Sometimes people disappeared after police picked them up, and nobody seemed to ask questions out loud. Even as a child, I understood something dangerous lived inside those buildings, besides poverty. My parents were trying to protect us the best way they knew how, but survival can exhaust people, especially when they are trying to build a future while living inside fear. Before we ever moved into Cabrini Green, my family had already been searching for something better. My father had been in the Air Force in Wichita Falls, Texas. After he was discharged, we flew back to Chicago together. My mother, my father, my brothers, and me. I still remember one of the first apartments we lived in before Cabrini. It barely felt like a real home. There was no bathroom inside the apartment. The bathroom was down the hall, and my father often had to walk me there because danger was always somewhere nearby. Then one day, everything changed. We moved into Cabrini Green, while the building still felt brand new. To many black families at that time, public housing did not look like failure yet. It looked modern. It looked safer. It looked like opportunity. We suddenly had 3 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and our own bathroom. My parents believed they were moving us toward a better future. I can still remember my first days at Jenner School. The building seemed brand new too. I remember sitting in a large auditorium filled with children while teachers called students to different classrooms. I had gone to kindergarten, but they skipped me into 2nd grade. At first, it felt like life might finally be opening up for us. But over time, I began noticing something darker hiding inside those buildings. Some children disappeared from school. Screaming echoed through the stairwells at night. And slowly, fear became part of everyday life. And if stories like this matter to you, if you believe these memories and experiences deserve to be preserved for future generations, take a moment to subscribe to this channel, because too many of these stories were never written down, and too many families carried them in silence. One year, everything inside our apartment changed in a matter of minutes. A fire broke out in the building while we were living on the 8th floor of Cabrini Green. I still remember the confusion, the smoke, the screaming, and adults trying to figure out how to escape. When the fire department arrived, we realized something terrifying. Their ladders could not reach high enough to get us out. Families had to find their own way down through smoke, panic, and chaos. Somehow we made it out alive, but the experience stayed with us long after the fire ended. We were injured physically, but mentally, something changed too. For a while, we moved in with relatives while the apartment was repaired. When we finally returned, many of the things that made our apartment feel like home were gone. The fire had destroyed our papers, photographs, and family memories. Pictures of me and my brothers disappeared forever inside those flames. At the time, I did not fully understand how painful that loss was for my parents. Looking back now, I realize Black families often lost more than property during moments like these. Sometimes they lost records of their existence itself. Pictures, documents, memories, proof that they had struggled, survived, and tried to build something for their children. After the fire, I also began noticing how worried my parents had become about protecting me. They understood dangers in the neighborhood that I was still too young to fully understand. And even though Cabrini Green had once looked like opportunity, fear was slowly becoming part of the walls themselves. The fire ended long before the fear did. After the smoke cleared and the sirens disappeared, something inside the building changed. The hallways looked the same. The elevators still groaned up and down. Children still ran through the corridors laughing and playing, but underneath the normal routines, people carried a new kind of tension. Parents watched more carefully. Neighbors talked in quieter voices, and many families began realizing something they had not wanted to face before. Safety inside Cabrini Green could disappear at any moment. For children, the confusion was difficult to explain. One day, adults told you that home was supposed to protect you. The next day, everybody was talking about fire, smoke, locked stairwells, and ladders that could not reach high enough to save people trapped above. Suddenly, the building no longer felt permanent. It no longer felt untouchable. Some residents started hearing rumors that certain buildings might eventually come down. Others believed the city had already stopped caring long before the fire ever happened. Repairs slowed down. Fear grew faster than answers. And little by little, people started noticing that promises made to poor Black communities often had expiration dates attached to them. At first, many families believed help was coming. Better housing, better protection, better opportunities. But over time, another question slowly began rising inside the community. What happens when help removes the very people it claimed to save? Because years later, many former residents would look back and realize the danger was not only the fire itself. The danger was what happened after the fire. The danger was discovering how quickly a community could become invisible once people in power decided the land underneath it had become more valuable than the people living on it. At first, the language sounded hopeful. Officials talked about renewal, redevelopment, safer neighborhoods, new beginnings. Those words sounded good on television and inside newspaper headlines, but many families quietly noticed something uncomfortable. The people making plans for the future often did not look like the people who had survived the past. Little by little, buildings came down. Entire sections of Cabrini disappeared behind fences, dust, and demolition equipment. Places where children once played became empty lots, waiting for expensive construction. Families who had spent generations building relationships inside those buildings suddenly found themselves scattered across the city and sometimes across the country. Some never saw their neighbors again. And for many former residents, this created a painful realization. The rules kept changing. Every time black families found a way to survive, stabilize, and build community, the goalposts seemed to move again. First came segregation, then overcrowding, then underfunded schools, then violence, then neglect, then demolition in the name of improvement. People were told they were being rescued, but many residents later asked a difficult question. If the community was truly worth saving, why did so many of the original families disappear from the future that was being built there? That question stayed with many former residents long after the buildings were gone, because people remembered what outsiders often refused to see. Cabrini Green was not only concrete, stairwells, and headlines about crime. Inside those buildings were grandparents raising children while parents worked long shifts. There were neighbors checking on elderly residents. There were birthday parties, church clothes hanging in closets, school pictures on living room walls, and families trying to survive inside a system that often made survival harder than it needed to be. But once demolition started, much of the public conversation focused on the buildings themselves instead of the people. America often looked at Cabrini Green and saw a problem to erase. Many residents looked at it and saw a community that had been neglected, isolated, and slowly abandoned long before the wrecking crews arrived. That difference matters. Because when communities are only discussed as projects, dangerous areas, or high crime zones, it becomes easier for the country to emotionally disconnect from the human beings living there. The conversation shifts away from opportunity and moves toward removal. And once removal becomes acceptable, displacement can be presented as progress. For many black families, this pattern felt painfully familiar. History had already shown how quickly land, stability, and opportunity could disappear. Entire black communities across America understood what it meant to build something valuable while knowing it could still be taken away. Long before Cabrini Green, black families had already experienced generations of instability tied to land, housing, and ownership. Some communities were destroyed by racial terror. Others were weakened slowly through political decisions, disinvestment, broken promises, and economic pressure that pushed families further away from stability with every generation. And yet, people kept building anyway. They built churches even when schools were underfunded. They built businesses when banks refused loans. They built neighborhoods where children could play, families could gather, and culture could survive. In many black communities, ownership became more than property. Ownership became protection. It became proof that a family had survived long enough to leave something behind for the next generation. That is why displacement cuts so deeply. Because losing a neighborhood is rarely just about losing a building. People lose routines. They lose nearby grandparents. They lose trusted neighbors watching children from apartment windows. They lose the barbershops, corner stores, churches, and friendships that quietly helped communities survive hard times. Once families become scattered, rebuilding those connections becomes far more difficult. Many former residents of Cabrini Green carried that loss for years. Some were relocated to unfamiliar neighborhoods where they knew nobody. Others struggled to find stable housing at all. Children who once walked familiar hallways with classmates and neighbors suddenly found themselves in completely different parts of the city. separated from the people and routines that had once made life feel predictable. For many young people, the displacement was confusing. Adults spoke about opportunity and relocation, but children often experienced something very different. They experienced loss. Some families moved multiple times within just a few years. One temporary apartment led to another. Schools changed. Bus routes changed. Friends disappeared. And slowly, many former residents began realizing that instability itself can become exhausting. When people are forced to constantly adjust, constantly relocate, and constantly rebuild, it becomes harder to plan for the future. Survival starts taking all the energy that ownership was supposed to create. That emotional exhaustion is rarely discussed when people talk about redevelopment. The public often sees ribbon cuttings, fresh paint, new condominiums, and promises of safer neighborhoods. But former residents sometimes remember something else entirely. They remember standing outside, watching buildings come down, while wondering where everybody was supposed to go. They remember hearing that the future was improving, while realizing they might not be included inside that future themselves. And for many Black families across America, that feeling was painfully familiar. Again and again, communities were told to be patient, work harder, follow the rules, build stability, save money, protect your children. But many Black families eventually noticed something deeply frustrating. The finish line kept moving. Just when one generation believed they were finally gaining ground, another barrier appeared waiting in front of them. After slavery came Black codes. After Black codes came Jim Crow. After segregation came redlining. After redlining came urban renewal projects, rising housing costs, aggressive policing, disappearing jobs, and redevelopment plans that often changed entire neighborhoods faster than longtime residents could financially survive inside them. The language changed across generations, but the pressure often felt familiar. And still, families kept trying to build something lasting. Parents worked double shifts, hoping their children would have more choices than they did. Grandparents held families together with routines, discipline, church, and sacrifice. Some saved money little by little for homes they hoped could stay inside the family for generations. Others simply tried to create stability in neighborhoods where stability was constantly under pressure. That struggle is one reason Commandment number 3 carried so much emotional weight after slavery. Thou shalt save your money, buy land when you can, and hold that land for future generations. And for countless families, that lesson was learned the hard way. Some learned it through violence. Entire Black neighborhoods were burned to the ground while authorities looked away or participated themselves. Others learned it through paperwork, zoning laws, highway construction, rising taxes, denied loans, and redevelopment plans that slowly pushed longtime residents out of places their families had spent decades building. The methods changed depending on the generation, but the outcome often felt painfully similar. Stability became fragile. That is one reason so many elders placed enormous importance on home ownership, land, education, and inheritance. They understood that freedom without protection could disappear faster than younger generations realize. Many grandparents and parents carried memories of watching opportunities vanish almost overnight. Jobs disappeared. Neighborhoods changed. Schools lost resources. Families were relocated. Promises made during one generation quietly disappeared during the next. And yet, despite all of that, Black families continued trying to build futures anyway. That determination matters, because history often focuses heavily on suffering, while ignoring the incredible discipline required to survive repeated instability. Families still woke children up for school every morning. Mothers still stretched small amounts of money into full meals. Fathers still worked exhausting jobs hoping the next generation might have a better life. Grandparents still passed down stories, warnings, recipes, church traditions, survival lessons, and pieces of wisdom they hoped would protect the next generation long after they were gone. In many Black families, those lessons were not treated like history lessons. They were survival instructions. Some elders taught children to save every dollar possible because they remembered times when opportunity disappeared overnight. Others warned young people to pay attention to who owned the stores, the buildings, the banks, and the land around them. Many families understood that power was often connected to ownership, even when nobody explained it directly in school. That understanding shaped how many parents raised their children. Education mattered. Discipline mattered. Reputation mattered. Ownership mattered. Families believed these things could create a layer of protection in a country where protection often felt uncertain. But even with all that preparation, many communities still found themselves vulnerable to forces larger than themselves. Entire neighborhoods could change within a single generation. Buildings disappeared. Property values rose. New developments arrived. Longtime residents suddenly found themselves struggling to remain in places their own memories helped build. And for many former residents of Cabrini Green, that reality created a painful emotional conflict. People wanted safer neighborhoods. They wanted better schools. They wanted less violence and more opportunity for their children. In 1968, after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., I remember fear moving through the neighborhood faster than words. I was still a child in 8th grade watching adults suddenly react to something even bigger than the fires themselves. My parents came rushing to the school to pick me up because people were panicking. Windows were being broken, stores were being looted. Sirens and gunfire echoed everywhere. Smoke filled the air. Fires were spreading across parts of the neighborhood, and nobody knew how far things would go. I remember my father protecting me while we ran home together. We ran all the way back to the 8th floor apartment. When I finally reached the window and looked down outside, the flames had risen so high it felt like I could almost touch the flames. That image stayed with me for the rest of my life. What made it even more painful was that I remembered those same rooftops differently before the destruction. I used to look down and see joy there. I remember seeing Curtis Mayfield and his band performing concerts in the neighborhood. Music, laughter, community, people gathering together outside during summer evenings. For a child, those memories felt alive and hopeful. But after the fires, so much changed. Many of the stores, pharmacies, and businesses that burned down never returned. And families like ours did not always have cars to leave the neighborhood easily for groceries or basic supplies. Churches and community groups eventually had to organize buses so residents could travel outside the neighborhood to shop for food each week. That is one of the parts history does not always explain well. Fires do not only destroy buildings, sometimes they destroy access. They destroy stability. They leave scars that remain long after the smoke disappears. And many black neighborhoods across America carried those scars for generations afterward. And after days of rioting, another image burned itself into my memory. Military armored tanks eventually rolled through the neighborhood streets. To a child, it felt like a war zone had arrived right outside our windows. The sound alone was terrifying. Heavy metal grinding against pavement. Soldiers moving through streets that only days earlier had been filled with children, families, music, and neighborhood life. But the neighborhood itself could not withstand that kind of force. The roads were crushed under the tremendous weight of the armored vehicles. Pavement cracked, streets buckled, and in many areas, those roads were never properly repaired afterward. That mattered more than people outside the community understood. Because damaged streets became another symbol of abandonment. Another reminder that recovery was not arriving as quickly as destruction had. For many residents, it felt like the neighborhood was left carrying visible scars long after the national cameras disappeared. And the emotional scars ran even deeper. Children who grew up there learned to recognize the sound of sirens before they learned algebra. Many families learned how quickly a community could change overnight. One moment people were attending concerts, shopping at local stores, and living ordinary lives. The next moment, smoke covered the sky, businesses were gone, soldiers occupied the streets, and entire blocks looked wounded. Some elders spent years trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy for the younger generation. They tried to protect children from fear while carrying their own grief privately. Because many adults understood something painful. Once businesses disappear, jobs disappear. Once investment disappears, opportunity often disappears with it. And once neglect settles into a neighborhood long enough, outsiders sometimes begin blaming the residents for conditions they did not create alone. That became one of the quiet tragedies many black communities faced after 1968. The fires eventually stopped, but in many neighborhoods, abandonment kept burning for years afterward. And that created another painful question. If a community loses the people who carried its memories, traditions, struggles, and victories, is the community still truly the same community at all? That question reached far beyond one neighborhood or one city. Black families across America had already survived slavery, segregation, racial violence, forced migration, broken promises, and economic exclusion. They understood something many outsiders did not. A community was never just land or buildings. A community was the people who protected one another when nobody else would. That is why many elders fought so hard to remain connected to churches, family homes, social clubs, schools, and neighborhood tradition. Those places carried emotional history. They carried survival lessons. They carried warnings about danger and reminders about dignity. Some families had photographs hidden inside old Bibles. Others passed down recipes, addresses, funeral programs, military medals, and handwritten notes that survived generations of uncertainty. Because for many Black Americans, memory itself became a form of protection. The elders knew what happened when history disappeared. People became easier to divide. easier to manipulate, easier to push aside. Once memories faded, outsiders could rewrite the story of who built the neighborhood in the first place. And slowly, many younger generations began noticing something painful. The very communities once labeled dangerous, unwanted, or neglected suddenly became desirable after longtime Black residents spent decades struggling to hold them together. That contradiction was impossible to ignore. Families who survived years of neglect often could not afford to enjoy the improvements that came later. In many cities, the people who endured the hardest years watched others inherit the rewards of the rebuilding process they helped make possible. Families who survived years of neglect often could not afford to enjoy the improvements that came later. In many cities, the people who endured the hardest years watched others inherit the rewards of the rebuilding process they helped make possible. And over time, many residents began noticing a painful pattern. Neighborhoods that were once described as dangerous, abandoned, or worthless suddenly became valuable after longtime Black families spent decades fighting to hold those communities together. New businesses arrived, new construction appeared, outside investment returned, but many of the original residents who carried the neighborhood through its most difficult years found themselves struggling to remain there. Some families were pushed out slowly by rising rent, higher taxes, and disappearing affordable housing. Others left because the emotional weight of what they had survived became too heavy to carry any longer. Entire generations had already lived through overcrowded schools, neglected buildings, discrimination, violence, and economic exclusion. By the time rebuilding finally arrived, many people felt exhausted. And yet something important was often missing from the way these communities were discussed. People talked about rebuilding buildings and repairing streets, but far less attention was given to protecting the people who preserved the neighborhood when nobody else seemed to care whether it survived at all. That became one of the deepest contradictions facing many Black communities after the 1960s. The same residents who had survived the fires, the unrest, the broken promises, and the years of neglect were now being asked to compete economically against the very forces that had ignored those neighborhoods for decades. For many families, that felt deeply unfair. Parents and grandparents who spent years protecting their communities suddenly found themselves struggling to afford rising rent, higher taxes, and the changing cost of living that arrived once outside investment returned. Some longtime residents watched luxury apartments rise near blocks that had once been ignored when children needed safer schools, better grocery stores, cleaner streets, and reliable city services. And many people began quietly asking difficult questions. Why did help seem to arrive only after the neighborhood became profitable for someone else? Why were communities expected to survive years of neglect alone? But once the land became valuable, longtime residents suddenly faced pressure to leave. Those questions were not simply about economics. They were about memory. They were about belonging. They were about whether the people who carried the neighborhood through its hardest years would still have a place there once rebuilding finally arrived, because many Black families understood something that statistics alone could never fully explain. A neighborhood is not only buildings and property values. A neighborhood is the people who create safety, culture, history, faith, music, protection, and community in the first place. The same residents who had survived the fires, the unrest, the broken promises, and the years of neglect were now being asked to compete economically against the very forces that had ignored those neighborhoods for decades. For many families, that felt deeply unfair. Parents and grandparents who spent years protecting their communities suddenly found themselves struggling to afford rising rent, higher taxes, and the changing cost of living that arrived once outside investment returned. Some longtime residents watched new apartments, businesses, and development appear near blocks that had once been ignored when families needed help the most. And slowly, another fear began spreading through many communities. People worried that the memories themselves were disappearing. The corner stores were changing. The old gathering places were fading away. Some churches closed their doors. Elderly neighbors passed on. Children moved farther away, searching for opportunity. And with every passing year, many families worried that future generations might never fully understand what these neighborhoods had survived together. That fear mattered because Black communities had already spent generations fighting to preserve history that others often ignored, erased, or misunderstood. The elders knew stories could disappear quickly if nobody protected them. They knew younger generations might only see poverty or damaged buildings without understanding the strength, sacrifice, and survival that existed behind those walls. Because even during the hardest years, these communities still produced music, faith, culture, activism, military service, educators, workers, artists, and families determined to keep moving forward. And slowly, many Black families began realizing something important. Survival alone was not enough to fully protect a community. A neighborhood could survive violence, discrimination, riots, and neglect for years, yet still remain vulnerable if the people living there did not control enough of the land, businesses, housing, and resources around them. That realization helped shape one of the most important lessons passed down after slavery and during the Great Migration. Save what you can. Buy property when possible. Build something your children can inherit. Because ownership became more than money. Ownership became protection. Families understood that land could not easily disappear overnight the way jobs sometimes could. A family home could become stability during difficult times. A neighborhood business could provide work when outside opportunities were limited. Churches, social halls, barbershops, beauty salons, restaurants, and grocery stores became part of the economic backbone that helped communities survive when larger systems often failed them. That is why so many Black families sacrificed so much trying to purchase homes, farmland, storefronts, and businesses despite enormous obstacles. Some worked multiple jobs. Some saved money quietly for years. Others pooled resources together through churches, relatives, and neighborhood networks because they understood something many people outside the community often overlooked. Ownership was tied directly to survival, stability, and the ability to remain connected to one another during difficult times. Many black families had already witnessed how quickly opportunities could disappear when jobs were lost, businesses closed, or neighborhoods faced violence and neglect. They understood that without some form of economic foundation, families could spend generations constantly rebuilding from the beginning every time crisis arrived. That is why land ownership carried such emotional importance for so many people after slavery and throughout the Great Migration years. A home was not simply a building. A business was not simply a paycheck. Property represented a chance to create roots deep enough that future generations might finally inherit something stronger than struggle alone. Some families purchased small homes despite discrimination from banks and housing policies. Others opened barber shops, restaurants, beauty salons, grocery stores, funeral homes, churches, and neighborhood businesses that became gathering places during hard times. Even modest ownership created forms of independence that many earlier generations had been denied completely, because deep down, many families were trying to answer the same difficult question: how do you protect a community long enough for your children to finally feel secure inside it? After slavery, many black families believed ownership could become a form of protection. Not luxury, not wealth in the modern sense, protection. Land meant something nobody could easily erase with a rumor, a threat, or a changing law. A home meant your children might sleep in the same place long enough to build memories that could survive more than one generation. A business meant your family might not have to beg another man for permission to eat. That dream shaped entire neighborhoods across America. People worked double shifts. Mothers cleaned houses. Fathers took dangerous factory jobs. Grandparents saved money inside coffee cans, Bibles, and hidden drawers because they believed every dollar pushed the family one step further away from dependency. And little by little, communities began to rise. Churches stood beside barber shops. Beauty salons opened near corner stores. Teachers lived down the block from preachers. Children walked streets where people knew their names. For the first time, some families felt something rare: stability. But history has a pattern many people still struggle to talk about honestly. The moment black communities began becoming valuable, outside forces often began seeing opportunity too. Property taxes changed. Highways suddenly appeared. Banks refused loans in one decade. Then developers suddenly wanted the same land in the next. Entire neighborhoods once labeled dangerous somehow became up and coming the moment longtime residents could no longer afford to remain there, and families started asking painful questions. If our parents and grandparents held these communities together during the hardest years, why are their children now being pushed out? If people survived segregation, redlining, violence, overcrowding, underfunded schools, and discrimination to keep these neighborhoods alive, who benefits once the neighborhood finally becomes profitable? Because rebuilding sounds beautiful until the original people disappear. And that is one of the hardest parts of Commandment number 3. Ownership was never only about buying land. It was about maintaining the ability to stay on it. If you're still watching, tell me in the comments, have you ever seen a neighborhood change so much that the people who built the community could no longer afford to live there. And as we continue this journey through the commandments after slavery, we now move deeper into one difficult question. What happens when memory survives, but ownership slowly disappears? But eventually, another reality began creeping into many black communities. The very neighborhoods families struggled to protect slowly became targets for outside investment. Not while the streets were broken, not while schools were underfunded, not while violence and poverty dominated headlines. But once communities showed signs of value, suddenly everybody noticed the land. Old homes were purchased cheaply. Property taxes rose. Rent climbed faster than wages. Longtime residents who had survived decades of hardship suddenly found themselves fighting a different kind of pressure, economic removal. And many elders recognized the pattern immediately. They had seen versions of it before. First came neglect, then came blame, then came redevelopment, and finally came displacement. Some families tried desperately to hold on. Grandparents refinanced homes to help younger relatives stay nearby. Churches organized food drives and housing support. Neighbors shared childcare, transportation, and extra groceries because community survival had always depended on cooperation. But pressure continued building, and one of the most painful parts was watching memories become marketable. Murals appeared celebrating culture. Tourists visited neighborhoods once avoided. Luxury apartments rose near streets where families once struggled just to survive winter. Yet many of the original residents could no longer afford to remain inside the very communities their sacrifices helped preserve. That contradiction still hurts today, because people were never simply protecting buildings. They were protecting history, relationships, identity, belonging. And maybe that is why commandment number 3 carries so much emotional weight. Ownership was not only about wealth, it was about making sure your children would still have a place to stand when the world around them changed. If you're still watching, tell me, what happens to a community when the memories remain, but the people disappear? A neighborhood is more than buildings. A real community carries invisible things people outside the neighborhood often cannot see at first. The woman at the corner store who quietly lets struggling parents pay tomorrow. The church mother who checks on elders during winter. The barber who knows every child by name. The grandmother watching children from the porch while parents work late shifts. Those connections become a form of safety. And when communities are scattered, people do not only lose property. Sometimes they lose the invisible support systems that helped families survive difficult years in the first place. Children suddenly attend schools far away from relatives. Elders become isolated from longtime neighbors. Local businesses disappear. Church memberships shrink. Family traditions slowly weaken because the people who carried those traditions are now separated by distance, rising costs, or constant relocation. And over time, something painful can happen. A community may still exist in memory while disappearing in real life. That loss is difficult to measure on paper, Developers may calculate property values. Cities may celebrate revitalization. New residents may see opportunity. But long-time residents often see something else. They see birthdays once celebrated on the same block, cookouts that lasted all summer, funerals where entire neighborhoods walked together, children who once felt surrounded by people who knew their family history. And that raises another difficult question. If rebuilding destroys the relationships that held a community together, was the community truly rebuilt at all? But even after displacement, something remarkable continued surviving inside many Black communities. Memory. Families still carried recipes, photographs, church programs, graduation pictures, military records, funeral fans, and handwritten addresses connecting them to places many could no longer physically afford to live. Some younger generations even began returning to ask questions their grandparents once avoided. What street did we come from? Who owned the family home? Why did everyone leave? What happened to the land? Because deep down, many people understood something important. A community does not completely disappear the moment people are scattered. As long as memory survives, rebuilding remains possible. That is why many families today are fighting to preserve more than buildings. They are preserving identity. Some are researching family history for the first time. Others are restoring cemeteries, protecting churches, recording elders, supporting Black-owned businesses, or teaching children stories nearly erased by time. And maybe that is one of the most powerful lessons hidden inside Commandment number 3. Ownership is not only about property deeds, it is also about protecting memory long enough for future generations to rebuild what earlier generations fought to create. Sometimes I wonder if younger generations fully understand what many elders were really mourning. It was never only the buildings, it was recognition. Walking outside and seeing people who knew your parents, who remembered your grandparents, who understood your family before you even explained your last name. That kind of belonging is difficult to describe once it disappears. Some neighborhoods today look newer, cleaner, more expensive. But to many former residents, they no longer feel familiar. The sounds changed, the faces changed, even the silence feels different. And maybe that is why some elders still drive through old neighborhoods long after they moved away. Not because they expect things to still be the same, but because part of them is still looking for the feeling of home. A porch that once stayed full during summer evenings, children running between apartment buildings, music playing through open windows, neighbors sitting outside watching over one another before security cameras replaced familiar eyes. Those memories still live inside people long after streets begin changing. And maybe that is part of what Commandment number 3 was always trying to protect in the first place. Not only land, but belonging. Maybe that is why so many families fought so hard to hold on to even the smallest pieces of what they built. An old photograph, a family Bible, a church program, a recipe written in fading handwriting, a deed folded carefully inside a drawer for decades. To outsiders, those things may seem small, but inside many Black families, they became proof that somebody was here, proof that people built lives despite obstacles designed to erase them, proof that generations struggled, sacrificed, prayed, worked, marched, migrated, and survived long enough to leave something behind for the next generation to find. And maybe that is the deeper meaning hidden inside Commandment number 3. Ownership was never only about money, it was about continuity. The ability for a child to grow up connected to something older than themselves. The ability for elders to pass wisdom down in places filled with memory instead of constant instability. The ability for families to say, "We were here, we built this, we belonged here." Because when people are disconnected from history long enough, they can begin feeling disconnected from themselves. That is why preserving memory matters. That is why protecting community matters. And that is why even now, many younger generations are searching for the stories earlier generations fought quietly to protect, not because they want to live in the past, but because understanding what was lost may help them better understand what still needs to be protected today. Some people believe ownership is only about money, but for many families, ownership was really about protection. Protection from being pushed out, protection from being forgotten, protection from watching your memories disappear one street at a time. Because a home is never just wood and concrete. A home is the grandmother sitting near the window, telling stories about people whose names never made it into history books. A home is the father working extra shifts, trying to keep the lights on long enough for his children to dream bigger than he was allowed to dream. A home is the church down the block, the corner store, the school pictures, the sound of summer laughter traveling through open windows. And when those places disappear, people are not only losing property, sometimes they are losing pieces of themselves. That is why so many families fought to buy land after slavery, why they saved nickels, why they shared rooms, why they worked jobs that exhausted their bodies. Because ownership meant maybe your children would not have to start from zero again. But history keeps asking the same painful question. If a community survives long enough to become valuable, who finally gets to stay? And maybe that question is not only about the past, maybe it is about now. If you are still watching, thank you for walking through this history with me. And if you believe these histories deserve to be remembered, protected, and passed on to the next generation, subscribe to the channel and walk with me as we continue uncovering the stories too many people were told to forget.